This is Home Value Stories. I'm Jamie Owen. This is a podcast that is designed to educate consumers like you about real estate valuation. Have you ever wondered how real estate appraisers go about finding comparable sales? How do we narrow down the search from an entire pool of information on sales in a neighborhood to homes that are truly comparable to the subject property? In this episode, I'm going to talk about that. I'm also going to talk about how identifying people by their fingerprints using the Henry classification system has some interesting similarities. So I hope you'll enjoy this episode. Before I became a real estate appraiser, I worked for the Denver Police Department in Denver, Colorado. I worked in the identification section of the Denver PD. To give you an idea of the time period in which I worked for the Denver Police Department, I remember one day we were all huddled around a TV watching police officers chase a white Ford Bronco down the highway, wondering exactly what would happen. That was later known as the infamous O.J. Simpson chase. Typically, what would happen if somebody was arrested is they would be taken downtown, they would be booked, and usually a cadet would roll the fingerprints of the individual, and they would shoot that card up to the identification section where I was through a tube that was kind of like a bank teller tube that we see today. That way, if a person was ever arrested again and they lied about their identity, which many criminals do, the police department would know that based on their fingerprints. We used what's called the Henry classification system. The Henry classification system is a long-standing method by which fingerprints are sorted by their individual characteristics. Fingerprints come in a number of classifications. Most fingerprints are either an arch, a loop, or a whorl in design. And each of those arches, loops, and whorls has a specific number of ridges. They also have a specific number of areas where they bifurcate, a term that was around long before it was popular or unpopular in the real estate profession. But a fingerprint examiner would count the number of ridges, they would classify each fingerprint, and once they had a code for all 10 fingerprints, they would come up with this Henry class. And this determines where that fingerprint card is filed in that enormous filing cabinet. The idea is that if somebody was to be arrested again, the person's fingerprints would be taken to the identification section where the fingerprint examiner would come up with the class based on the Henry system of that card. And that really just narrows down the search in that massive filing cabinet as to where those potential fingerprints might be. So usually the fingerprint examiner would have to narrow it down to a group of cards, and then they would have to use their good old-fashioned human eye to be able to really know if there was a good match or not. The system worked very, very well, and to my knowledge, this Henry system is still in existence in some police departments. How did the Henry classification system come to be? In the mid-1800s, Sir William James Herschel discovered that fingerprints really didn't change much over time. They stayed relatively similar, at least the arches, the loops, the whorls, the main qualities of those fingerprints. In 1880, Dr. Henry Faulds wrote to Charles Darwin explaining a system for classifying fingerprints. Well, Charles Darwin was not able to help him, but he agreed to forward that information to his cousin, Sir Francis Galton. While Henry Faulds and Sir Francis Galton didn't do a whole lot of communication back in those days, they did both come up with fingerprint classification systems that were generally similar. And thus, the Henry classification system was born. The Henry system allows for the 10 fingerprints to be recorded based upon a classification system. But the basic idea is to take this information, these fingerprints, classify them, and that classification would help narrow down the search for fingerprints that were similar. And really, that is very much like what we as real estate appraisers do when we're looking for comparable homes. Before we bifurcate away from talking about identifying people by their fingerprints using the Henry system to talking about identifying comparable homes based on certain classifications, let's talk about our sponsor. Home Value Stories is sponsored by FindMyAppraiser.com. FindMyAppraiser.com is a network of trusted, knowledgeable local appraisers dedicated to delivering accurate, quality valuations for your home or business. If you're looking for an excellent appraiser in your area, go to FindMyAppraiser.com. They have the best appraisers that care about you, the consumer. There's more to the Henry system than I've touched on in this podcast. The reason I wanted to mention the Henry system, though, is because it's a good example of how we take a large amount of information and we narrow it down. Just like fingerprint examiners use the Henry system to narrow down a large amount of fingerprint cards into a much smaller group of more similar fingerprints. Likewise, real estate appraisers have to take a relatively large number of homes that have sold in an area, and we have to narrow them down to homes that are truly comparable. If you're trying to find comparable homes in your area, how can you do so? When searching for comparable sales, we want to search for sales that are in the same neighborhood as the property we're appraising in. And so if you're a homeowner and you're looking for comparable sales to use to price your home, you're also going to want to look to the same neighborhood that you're living in order to find comparable sales. Now, if you're not a real estate appraiser, how can you determine what the neighborhood boundaries are? A neighborhood boundary could be a lot of different things. It could be a highway, a main road. It could be railroad tracks. It could be a natural boundary like a river, a lake, a mountain, or some other naturally occurring boundary. A neighborhood boundary might also be a legal boundary, like a city or county line, or even a school district. And there are other characteristics as well, but let's just keep it simple and stick with those for now. By the way, when it comes to a city boundary, often there are numerous neighborhoods within a city, especially a big city. And even within one seemingly similar neighborhood, there could be location differences that impact value. For instance, there are some neighborhoods that look similar. They're in the same city. They have the same general neighborhood boundaries, but one part of the neighborhood might be in one school district, while another part of the neighborhood could be in a completely different school district. And yes, sometimes being in a different school district can impact market value. So we have to be aware of the makeup of the neighborhood, and those details make a difference. Now, I'd like to also dispel a rumor that we have to, as real estate appraisers, stay within 1 mile of the property that we're appraising. We might be appraising a very unique property in which we may have to travel miles, in fact, many miles in some cases, in order to find something that's truly comparable. And there's a lot that goes into that situation. But that's not usually the case. Usually we're able to find comparable sales within the subject's neighborhood. Now, if you're in a high density neighborhood, an urban area where there's lots of homes and lots of sales, staying within a mile is probably very easy to do. And you'd have to ask yourself, why would I go outside of a mile to look for comparable sales when there are lots of sales within a mile? But there are other areas that are less dense, they're more spread out, the lots are bigger, in which we might have to go outside of a mile or 2 miles. Whatever the situation, we want to make sure that the homes that we're using are in the same neighborhood if possible, and if they're not, at least in competing areas that are also comparable. Incidentally, there might be sales within a mile or even within a half mile that are not appropriate to use because they might be, as I mentioned, in a different school district or even in a different neighborhood, even though they're within a mile. So that is something that we have to be careful of. We also don't want to price shop. So you might have 2 different neighborhoods. They're all within a mile. In one neighborhood, home prices are selling for more than in another neighborhood. So as a real estate appraiser, we're going to look for comparable sales that are in the subject's neighborhood. Even though maybe a mile down the road, homes are selling for more, and they happen to be within that mile radius, doesn't matter. We want to really measure the market based upon location. Once we've narrowed down the search to sales that are within our neighborhood, or if we can't find sales within our neighborhood, at least sales that are in comparable locations, the next thing we want to do is to narrow our search further by looking at homes with a similar quality of construction. Now, you might be wondering, though, how can you tell if a home has a similar quality of construction? After all, we can't go in and rip the drywall off and see what's behind the walls, can we? Well, there are some things that we can look at. My wife and I purchased our first home in Parma, Ohio. That's right, the same city that the awesome Drew Carey grew up in. Now, our first home, was very simple. It had 4 exterior walls. It had some very minimal windows and a very minimal roof line. Nothing fancy, your typical first home. The inside had a very basic kitchen and a very basic bathroom. The trim was, well, basic. There were no major updates, no major upgrades. I would say that the quality of construction was fair, maybe on the low side of average. So, if I were appraising a home like that, I would look for other homes with a simple exterior. Not much to the exterior, just very simple, and not much in the way of a decorative appeal, just your simple basic home. When it comes to quality of construction, there are other things that we look at as well. Take, for instance, the exterior walls. What are they made of? Are they vinyl sided? Is the siding upgraded? Is the exterior made of a brick or stone, hardy board, stucco, wood shakes, things like that? That makes a difference in terms of quality. What are the materials that make up the roof cover? Is it asphalt shingles or a metal roof? Is the roof clay tile roofing? Or maybe it's slate. All of that has an impact on the quality of construction. What about on the interior? What are the ceiling heights? Are they just your basic ceiling heights around 8 feet tall? Or are they 9 or 10-foot ceilings? Maybe they're 20-foot ceilings. See, that makes a difference. What are the ceilings like? Are they just flat ceilings throughout the home? Or are some areas coffered? Are they cathedral ceilings? See, that makes a difference when it comes to quality of construction. And generally, a higher quality of construction is going to demand a higher value. Some homes offer a much more complicated exterior design. Did you know that every additional corner created on a home when it's being built costs more money? So a home that is a perfect rectangle is going to cost less to build than a home with many corners and bump outs. What about a roof? A simple roof is going to cost less than one with more decorative features. Is the roof flat? Or is it a simple gabled roof that looks like an A? Is it a bonnet roof? A hip and valley roof? Not to be compared to a cool roof. Just kidding. A pyramid mansard roof? A saltbox roof? Or a roof with dormers and other decorative features? The fancier the roof generally is an indication of a higher quality of construction. What about exterior trim and molding? Is your home very simple and basic? Is the trim on the exterior fairly basic? Or does it offer custom trim work, like upgraded window casing and millwork? What about the windows on your home? Is your home like our home in Parma, just very basic, minimal windows? Or does your home offer custom windows that are maybe larger than what's normal? Maybe you have additional windows in your home. Maybe you have transoms letting more light in and windows with decorative features. Or what about your exterior doors? Are they just basic or are they custom doors with beautiful features? All of these things add to the quality of construction. How about the interior of your home? Is it like our first home, pretty basic, a basic kitchen and bathroom with no major updates or upgrades? Or do you have a kitchen with upgraded finishes, upgraded features, upgraded appliances? What about the trim on the inside of your home? Is it just basic trim or is it upgraded trim going throughout? Do you have crown molding? Lots of other features in the millwork that can add to the quality of construction. And by the way, just having upgraded trim and that's all, or some upgrades, may not advance a home from being average to good quality or good to very good or excellent quality. But every little bit helps. And if your home is loaded with lots of features, that's going to make a difference in value. So the point is that a home that we're comparing to ours needs to be comparable in terms of quality of construction. And that goes without saying, but it's important. And sometimes that's not easy to see on paper until you actually physically start looking at the exterior and interior photos of different homes. Well, we've narrowed down our search to homes that are within the neighborhood or a comparable area, to homes with a comparable quality of construction. What's next? How about condition? It goes without saying that we want to search for homes that have a comparable condition to ours. Is your home new? Or is it 10 years old? Or 20 years old? Or maybe it's 100 years old? Usually condition makes a big difference in terms of value. If we own a home that is older, is the kitchen updated or is it remodeled? What about the bathrooms? By the way, there is a difference between updating a kitchen or bathroom versus remodeling one. Updating, at least in my view, means that some aspects have been updated in the kitchen or bathroom, like could be new countertops or appliances or flooring or lighting, but not everything has been updated. Whereas with remodeling, the kitchen may have been totally gutted and replaced with a new kitchen with new cabinets, countertops, new lighting, flooring. Everything is basically new or has been renovated in some way so that it's basically a new kitchen. Same goes for bathrooms. So there is a difference between updating something and remodeling something. If your home has not been updated, or it has minimal updates, like maybe just some cosmetic updating, like new carpet and paint, well, you're going to want to try to find homes that are similar. But if your home has been completely renovated, obviously you're going to want to look for other homes that have been renovated to a generally comparable degree. Now, since we're talking about condition, it's important to note that as a home gets older, it may have been updated or remodeled numerous times. So on homes that are older in terms of age, we're going to want to look more carefully at the effective age of a home versus its actual age. For instance, you might have a home that's 50 years old, but it's recently been renovated and it has an effective age of being 10 years old. So ideally, what you'd like to find is another home that is similar in actual age, but more importantly, one that is similar in terms of effective age. Well, that's it for condition. I know you get the idea. Let's talk about what's last on our list for this conversation. Let's talk about gross living area. Do you know what the gross living area of your home is? I wouldn't necessarily go by public records because they can be inaccurate at times. Here's a good example. Say you have a 2-story home and you have some areas of your first floor that are open to the second floor, like some cathedral ceilings. Now, sometimes public records will indicate that these areas of the second floor that are open to the first floor are gross living area square footage, when in reality they're not. They're not unless you have the ability to walk on air. So those open areas are not considered to be gross living area. The public records may not reflect that. And there are other things that need to be considered when it comes to determining whether or not the square footage of an area of a home is gross living area. Now, if you don't have a good idea, you can always hire an appraiser to measure your home to make sure that you know the accurate gross living area of your home, because pricing your home based upon an accurate gross living area is extremely important. Once you know this, you can search for homes with comparable GLAs, or gross living areas. When I'm searching for comparable sales, I like to start by searching for homes that are generally comparable in all the other things that we've talked about, but with 20% less square footage than my home that I'm appraising, and then 40% larger gross living area than the home I'm appraising. So on a 1,000 square foot home, I'm going to search for homes with gross living areas between 800 square feet and 1,400 square feet. Now, you might be asking, why? Well, it's very common for real estate agents to include finished basements in what they're reporting for a home's gross living area in the multiple listing service, or Zillow or other listing services. So in order to try to catch a potentially comparable home in which a realtor may have done this, I like to look at homes with a larger GLA. And if that larger GLA turns out to be actual GLA, then I won't use that sale. But a lot of times I find that gross living area as reported in the multiple listing service is actually smaller than being reported. So it takes some investigative work to find that out. And please, don't take these percentages and run with them. It's just a starting point. If I find a lot of homes that have sold within this percentage range, then I'm going to narrow my search to find the most comparable. Conversely, if I can't find any comparable sales in this percentage range, well, I may increase my range or increase my search in other ways to find comparable sales. Fannie Mae, FHA, and other industry standards usually state that below grade or partially below grade areas should not be valued as gross living area. Now, there are some exceptions to that rule, and I'm not going to get into those in this podcast, but it is true there are some exceptions to the rule, and there's different parts of the country where an area that is below grade or partly below grade can be included in the gross living area. But generally, especially Northeast Ohio, that's generally not the case. Trying to price your home based upon a price per square foot solely usually only works if the home you use or the homes that you use to derive this price are very comparable. So I would guard against using simply a price per square foot in trying to find comparable sales. For a discussion of this, you might want to read my article at the Cleveland Appraisal blog entitled, "If You Price Your Home Like Froyo, You're Gonna Get Licked." Now, one last thing I'd like to talk about when it comes to trying to find comparable sales is bracketing. So once you've narrowed your search to a generally comparable pool of sales, you can fine-tune your search by bracketing different features of your home. For instance, if your home offers 1,000 square feet of gross living area, you'll want to try to find a home with maybe a little less gross living area and one that offers a little more gross living area. The same is true with lot size, which we didn't talk about in this episode, but that's another important thing to consider. You'll want to make sure that the homes you're comparing to your home have comparable lot sizes. So you'll want to find a home with a little bit smaller lot size and then one with a little bit more acreage. And you can do this. You can bracket different features of your home that will help you to really fine-tune which homes are the most comparable to yours. Once you've narrowed your home to homes within the neighborhood that are comparable in terms of quality of construction, condition, gross living area, and other features, well, you're well on your way to pricing your home accurately for the market. So I hope that this topic has been helpful to you if you're trying to search for comparable sales. If you're having trouble pricing your home, please pick up the phone and call a real estate appraiser in your area. If you're in Northeast Ohio, give me a call. You can find my information at the Cleveland Appraisal blog. Or if you're in another area, go to Find My Appraiser. They have the best appraisers, and we'd be more than happy to help you price your home correctly for the market. Thank you so much for joining me here today to talk about real estate valuations. I hope that you found this information useful and a little entertaining. If you like my podcast, you might also enjoy my blog, which you can find at the Cleveland Appraisal blog. If you're interested in housing stats for neighborhoods in Northeast Ohio, please check out my other podcast called Cash, the Cleveland Appraiser Stats on Housing. Each episode is about 2 to 3 minutes, and in them I share housing stats from specific neighborhoods I've recently appraised in. Like this podcast, you can find that one on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to yours. And if you have a real estate-related story that you'd like to share on this podcast, please send me an email at homevaluestories@gmail.com or find me on Twitter @storiesvalue. Until we get together again, I hope that all of your stories are happy ones. Ciao.